Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, I'm actually going to take you through a blog that I wrote. I have had a lot of clients recently who want me to help them deal with guilt, the guilt that they feel over abuse that they suffered as a child. To me, as a therapist, this is one of the most heartbreaking things that I have to deal with. There are people out there whose lives are literally on hold. They are devastated by the feelings of guilt that they have about things that happened to them when they were a child. So I wrote a blog about this, and I thought what I would do is record this video to take you through that blog, to try and help you with the steps that I take my clients through, to help them ease the burden of this guilt. So let's have a look at this. I called it How I Help My Clients Overcome Guilt and Shame. And there are really 6 key steps. And I find that these steps work really well when there is guilt present as an adult. And it's really, really helpful with people who have had narcissistic parents or who have suffered any kind of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse. Because I find that those people, the guilt that they carry, it's because they were made to feel guilty by the people who were actually the guilty party. And they feel guilty because they have been given the impression that it was their fault, that they deserved it, or that they should somehow have stopped it, which of course is absolute nonsense. And we know that as adults from our adult perspective, but that's not where this belief and this idea and this perception is created. That's created in the subconscious when a person is very, very young. So it's there that we need to deal with this. So let me just read to you what I wrote in this blog. I want to read it to you because I wrote it in a way that will be really helpful to you. So the first step is I help them to realize that the guilt they are feeling was very likely created in their childhood when they were vulnerable, helpless, and powerless. And they probably accepted the guilt because they were manipulated by an adult who should have known better. So I find invariably when a child is carrying a burden of guilt, that burden has actually been placed there by the guilty party, which is usually an adult or a person in authority who should have known so much better, and they should be carrying the burden of that guilt. But it's so much easier to place it on a small and powerless and vulnerable child. So that's the first step, coming to that realization, which for a lot of people, when they haven't had the help and support they need, it might be the first time that anyone has actually validated this for them and that they feel heard and seen and supported in this way. So then number 2, we identify the situations and circumstances where that guilt was created, all of the parties involved and the roles that they played. So we establish in the logical conscious mind that they are not the guilty party. First step, make sure it's clear in the logical mind, because then we can start to work on rewiring and reprogramming in the subconscious. And the third is a really, really important step. We work on instilling the understanding that a child can never be guilty or responsible for any of the words, the actions, the thoughts, the behaviors of an adult. A child just cannot be guilty. An adult might try to make a child feel responsible, but as adults, we are all responsible for our own actions, reactions, everything we do and say, whatever the circumstances or whoever is involved, we are responsible for that. And trying to put that blame onto a child, that's just an absolute nonsense. And I know that for so many of you, when you hear that, that in itself will be a relief, to that will validate you. You will feel validated and understand that the guilt, the responsibility that you're feeling, it cannot possibly be yours. So once we've got to there, and we fully understand all of those things, we can start to examine the impact of all of this on the adult life. What are the thoughts, the feelings, the beliefs, the perceptions, and the behaviors and the patterns that this burden of guilt and shame that it is causing? So we identify those. And then we can take all of this information and we can actually, through deep relaxation and meditation techniques, we can actually begin to communicate and collaborate with the subconscious mind. We can find out, we know what the logical mind thinks and feels. We can find out what is it that the subconscious has created, because we know that all of this is created, stored, and projected from the subconscious, which is why there's only so much that talk therapy and working with the logical mind can ever do. It's very common for me to be speaking to clients and they wonder why they can't heal, why they can't progress, why they can't move forward. And it's because they don't actually know what is lodged in the subconscious and therefore what they actually need to heal from. So that's really the last step then, to work with the subconscious, to rewire, reprogram, and to reinforce and instill some new beliefs to replace the guilt and shame. And it's really not unusual for those feelings of guilt and shame to be lifted in the first session or the second session. The best thing that I can do here is to actually take you through a scenario. You'll understand this much better if I take you through a real life example. So I recently started working with a young woman. This is the second part of the blog that I wrote. I recently started with a young woman who was feeling very depressed and anxious. She was withdrawn and uncertain, and I could tell that physically and emotionally she was presenting as if she was carrying a huge burden. And she just seemed so weighed down by something very heavy, and clearly she was struggling to find any joy or happiness or purpose. So she came to me because she had depression and she felt unhappy, which was understandable, but that was not her real issue. So as we started the subconscious work, which is done through very specific deep relaxation and meditation techniques, and the discovery is done in a very particular way, we were quickly able to establish that she was feeling guilt. She was experiencing guilt and shame. And as we started to do the work, she saw herself as a small, powerless, and vulnerable child. And she could clearly see how she had been manipulated by her abuser into thinking that she was guilty with regards to being sexually abused. And she was experiencing all of this guilt and shame as we reviewed what had happened to her and throughout her life. The difference is that as we did the review, is that now she was reviewing it as the adult that she is, and she was bringing into it a new perspective, a new lens, a new way of seeing it, with all the safety, the security, the certainty, and the knowledge of the adult that she was, instead of the child that she used to be. And it was from this new perspective of the adult that she was clearly able to see what had happened to her, the belief that she had accepted, why and how she had accepted it. But she also saw that it wasn't hers, that she never should have taken it on, and therefore she was able to immediately reject it. So you see, unlike the child, the adult has power, has a new perception and an intuition. And the incredible thing is that when we work in the subconscious, the subconscious very easily accepts these new ideas when we bring in safety and we tell it that this is happening from a new perspective. We literally upgrade from the child that she was to the adult that she now is. No need to carry that guilt and shame. And it's really not unusual for clients to release that kind of guilt and shame in their first session, or at least the first couple of sessions. So it's a very clever and unique way of working with the subconscious to uncover, understand, and release any limiting beliefs, but in this case, in particular, relating to guilt and shame. And I find that once the client has done that, they immediately look different. They'll be standing taller, sitting more certain, more sure, more self-confidence. Their face will change. Sometimes they find that they feel lighter, their aches and pains disappear, but certainly they have a different demeanor, a different energy, and an attitude. So basically, that's the steps that I take to help my clients uncover, recover, and release guilt and shame. So I really hope that you resonated with some of that and that it helps you if you could relate to that and you are also on a journey to understand and release the guilt and shame that you're feeling, because I can guarantee that it's not yours. It's not your burden. It never should have been. So I really hope you find a way to put it down.